Hello viewers, welcome to my first festive season themed video of 2017. Today's topic is one of my favourites, Krampus, the Christmas Devil. I was introduced to Krampus as a child while living in Germany. He has seen a bit of mainstream popularity in recent years, which I have to admit I have mixed feelings about, but never mind that. Let's get this show on the road. Who or what the fuck is Krampus? Well, let's start with what he looks like. In simple terms, he's pretty much your stereotypical beastly devil. Krampus has a few different physical variations, but most are very similar to satyrs or fauns of Greek myth. A man-goat-like hybrid covered in goat, ram, or even bear fur, with snarling features from which a long, lolling, forked tongue and curled horns protrude. Krampus is definitely a familiar demonic sight by today's standards. Sometimes he's depicted with one human foot and one cloven hoof as a extra oddity, but this particular quirky depiction is largely unexplained as far as I can tell. Along with this beastly visage, he tends to be carrying either a large wicker basket or a sack on his back. Sometimes covered in jangling chains and armed with such things like birch switches and horsehair whips. Often he is shown wearing bells as to warn mortals of his approach. Where does Krampus come from? Well, the origin of the name Krampus is German for the word claw, Krampen, which certainly foreshadows his vicious purpose. The origin of Krampus is somewhat of a mystery, but he certainly seems to be very old with deep roots in Alpen folklore and found in countries surrounding Austria. He is celebrated during Krampusnacht, or Krampus night, on the night of the 5th of December, the eve of Nikolaustag, the feast of St. Nicholas on, surprisingly, December 6th. Some have gone so far to even suggest he comes from Norse mythology as the son of Hel, daughter of Loki, though this seems to be disputed as Krampus does not seem to feature in folklore of the northern regions of Europe as a individual character, which in turn suggests it's more of a case of joining some interesting dots that don't quite relate. Other proposed origins include derivative paths from the horned god from Wicca, Holla the eternal hunter from Norse mythology, and even the Yule goat. All of which, in the interest of time, I will not go into here. But feel free, of course, to Google at your own leisure. As you can gather, over time, things evolve and it gets harder to draw that clear origin. I was unable to unearth any specific Krampus-orientated pre-introduction of Christmas celebrations other than perhaps Yule. Perhaps there were, but they have either been lost to the mists of time or I've simply failed to find them. So what does Krampus do? During Krampusnacht, he would come to town, not to bring presents. This winter visitor would act as the punisher of badly behaved children, a boogeyman to keep the little ones from wandering off into the winter night. Depending on the levels of naughtiness, the Krampus would give the child a fright, or even a beating with his birch rods. And for the naughtiest of the naughty, there was the basket or sack which he carried on his back. The story of what happens to those children varies from teller to teller, but some variations include being whisked away to St. Nicholas's home. I will get to that relationship shortly. Being taken to Krampus's mountain underworld, or hell itself to be punished. The punishment varies from things like a year's imprisonment in the underworld, various methods of torture, and even being devoured by Krampus himself. Pretty gruesome prospects for a child. While he is indeed a fearsome and vicious creature, Krampus is not necessarily evil in his brutality. He is the punisher of the wicked, and bound to follow those rules. The innocent, well-behaved children are safe from his punishments and rewarded for their obedience. To that end, Krampus is not just for Christmas. For instance, in the Austrian province of Styria, households would hang gold-painted bundles of birch on their walls as year-round reminders of Krampus, just in case Krampus slipped from a child's mind. Think of it as the original Elf on the Shelf. This region seems to have a strong link to Krampus, as they tend to show him without St. Nicholas. Again, bear with me, I'll get to that. Not only that, but Krampus seems to have his own set of companions. Antlered wild men known as Schabmanner or Rauchen, excuse my German pronunciation, I am rusty, who seems to be covered in straw, but I can't really find much information on these dark companions, maybe due to the isolated villages from which this tradition seems to stem from. By now, of course, you may have noticed I have mentioned Christmas, Yule, and indeed St. Nicholas without much context or explanation. Well, here comes some historical context. During the 12th century, the Catholic Church worked hard to ban Krampus celebrations, along with other pagan celebrations. This is not surprising given their propensity to clamp down on competing celebrations, and indeed Krampus's similarity to the established Christian devil imagery. The demonization of pagan symbolism is an entire video on its own. I'm not going to go into it here. This was, of course, resisted by the local population, and the Catholic Church's attempts to quash the tradition failed. Over time, Krampus was blended into Christian celebrations by the 17th century. It is possible that this is where Krampus gained his chains. This could be symbolizing his enslavement and subservience to St. Nicholas and the Church. But it has also been suggested that the chains predate this mixing and are actually from pagan initiation rites. Krampus over the years is shown as either enslaved or as a demon who actually chooses to work with St. Nicholas willingly. Either way, the duo, by this point, were an established pairing. St. Nicholas would give gifts and blessings to the good children, and Krampus would deal with the bad ones with less present gifts such as sticks, coal, frights, beatings, or even abduction. During the 19th century, colourful Krampus carton were introduced, commonly emblazoned with Gruß von Krampus, greetings from Krampus. This showed a softening into being a more playful and, dare I say, commercial character. By the early 20th century, Krampus had become incredibly popular, and in some places had taken over from St. Nicholas as the primary gift giver as well. It was about this time that there was another attempt to ban Krampus. This was spearheaded again by the Catholics, but of the Austro-fascist variety, stating that Krampus was invented by the Social Democrats to undermine the moral fabric of society and sow the seeds of communism. The legend weathered World War II and continues into the modern era. Modern Krampus lives on in annual Krampuslauf events, the Krampus Run, where Krampus-costumed men get tanked up on schnapps and chase people through the streets causing mischief. Sounds like a riot. I can't ascertain where this exactly started, or if it's a modern version of some of the older celebrations, but as I said, I think that sounds like a whale of a time. I would love to go. Krampus has also found a home in recent media depictions in comics and TV, showing up in an episode of the Grimm series and several episodes of American Dad. He also has a few films under his belt, which he is prominently featured, notably A Christmas Horror Story and the originally titled Krampus. I have to say though, I highly recommend Krampus. I watched it last year and it has hit my regular Christmas viewing list. I certainly really enjoy the mischief of this strange Christmas legend, with its roots that go back into the dark wild of our human pasts, that has stood the test of time, and while perhaps changing its meaning and role somewhat today, still manages to intrigue. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and a very merry Krampusnacht to you. Now go do something devilish. Be seeing you.